Hey there, folks. Welcome to Spectrum Pulse. We talk about music, movies, art, and culture, and it's Billboard Breakdown. I don't remember. So, okay, fine. I was wrong. I made the assumption that given its heavy reliance on streaming, I expected Ariana Grande to suffer some major losses, and while nearly every song lost by a considerable margin, she didn't actually have any dropouts this week. And yet, beyond that, this week did seem to go through a pretty standard rotation. And given what they turned out to be, it implies that Ariana Grande didn't exactly see huge competition this week either, and might be in more dicey territory when we get impact from Lil Pump, Gunna, and especially Offset next week. Again, we'll see. But in the meantime, she's still a major factor in the top 10, so let's start off with that and how for another week, 7 Rings by Ariana Grande is squatting at number 1. And it's not really a surprise. Huge radio momentum, a good sales week, still dominant in streaming. As much as I don't really want to admit it, I'm not sure I'm seeing the competition to take it out, at least not soon. I certainly don't see Without Me by Halsey rising up to number 2 this week being a credible threat. Radio finally stalled out, and streaming and sales are starting to dip, and I'd still probably put more money on Sunflower by Post Malone and Sway Lee rising up to number 3, because while the radio and sales are weaker, it's got a little bit more on streaming momentum on aggregate. Hell, they probably both went past Thank You Next by Ariana Grande, which slipped down to number 4 as streaming and radio have started to fall off hard. But what I can see being a real competitor is our new debut in the top 5, Please Me by Cardi B and Bruno Mars at number 5. Now, I'll be talking more about the song later on, but with huge sales and some frankly absurd radio growth, mostly because it seems like radio has decided Finesse Part 2 is a really safe bet, I do see this holding up, even if streaming looks a fair bit lower than it should be, which might imply more industry hype than natural groundswell. Not a good look for Cardi B. Then we have Happier by Bastille and Marshmello still at number 6. I keep predicting this is gonna fall off, but while it is losing everywhere, it's just not losing as fast as Sicko Mode by Travis Scott at number 7, which might have better streams but is falling off a fair bit faster on the radio. Then off its big debut last week, we got Break Up With Your Girlfriend, I'm Bored by Ariana Grande tumbling down to number 8. To be expected, because even despite huge YouTube, the sales and the streaming, they are slipping, and radio is just not nearly getting on board as quickly. And finally, we got High Hopes by Panic at the Disco, somehow still clinging to its radio peak as it falls to number 9, and Wow by Post Malone narrowing the margins on radio and sales, but just not having the streaming it needs, so it fell down to number 10. But now we got the story of our losers and dropouts. And again, I think the interesting piece here is that Ariana Grande was not in the latter category. Instead, we saw long-running cuts fizzle out, like Uproar by Lil Wayne, Burning Man by Dierks Bentley featuring Brothers Osborne, You by Jacquees, and Talk to Me by Rich the Kid and Tory Lanez. Shame on that first one. I thought Lil Wayne would have a little bit more traction with Uproar. But make no mistake, Ariana Grande did take hits with a lot of songs this week. Nassau went to 46, Needy fell to 48, Bloodline slid down to 53, Bad Idea dropped to 55, Fake Smile faded down to 57, Imagine dropped to 58, Ghost and Fade down to 62, In My Head fell to 74, and Makeup faded all the way down to 95. But outside of that, look, I'm not going to complain that Who Do You Love by the Chainsmokers and 5 Seconds of Summer went to 85 off the debut last week, Good Girl by Dustin Lynch continued down to 97, Make It Sweet by Old Dominion fell to 96, and Arms Around You by XXXTentacion, Lil Pump, Maluma, and Sway Lee fell down to 98. The only one I'm a little bit dispirited about is the loss for When the Party's Over by Billie Eilish going to 88, but it looks like Bury a Friend is holding steady right now, so I'll take what I can get. Now, given that we didn't have any returning entries this week, let's consider our gains, but also given that Ariana Grande didn't suffer the cataclysmic drops I was expecting, there are fewer rebounds than I expected here too. Of course, the big story is how Murder on My Mind by YNW Melly surged up to 14, unfortunately taking mixed personalities with Kanye West up to 60 along the way. But the margins there are some surprises. For one, even though Kalani's got a new album coming, I am a little bit surprised she's got enough presence to get nights like this with Ty Dolla $ign to rebound to 72. Still not really interested in covering the album, sorry. Or that anyone gave a shit about Be Alright by Dean Lewis to have it rise to 30. And along with that list of surprises, I certainly didn't expect to see Beautiful Crazy by Luke Combs to surge to 23, or What Makes You Country by Luke Bryan to pick up to 54, or Here Tonight by Brett Young to leap to 67, or even Miss Me More by Kelsey Ballerini rise to 81. Not the only shifts in country to make moves this week, but yeah, we'll get to those. Outside of that, I Like It by Cardi B featuring Bad Bunny and J Balvin rose up to 33, and Baby Shark by Pink Fong went to 38. Yes, it's now back in your head for the next day or so. You are welcome. But where things get a little bit messier, or let's be honest, a lot worse, come in our new arrivals. Starting off with number 100, One That Got Away by Michael Ray. Okay, let me get this straight. Nashville Radio decided instead of pushing off the strength of winning Album of the Year for all genres at the Grammys, they decided to push this instead. Now, if you forgot Michael Ray ever existed, well, congratulations, so did everyone else everywhere else, but he actually had a single breakthrough way back in 2015 that I actually covered on this show. Nobody cared about it then, certainly not me, and nobody will care about this now. Cheap fake percussion, a gutless groove, filmy guitars, weird tacked-on synth effects that don't match the overdubs cribbed from Old Dominion, and while we're on that topic, the lyrics grabbing up song references or something Old Dominion did a few years ago as well. But really, how Michael Ray seemed to double down on the women as trophies comparison, it's sleazy in a way that doesn't remotely match the production. He says that she's gonna be decorating his car, and for all this for a song where it's very clear that he's not gonna be holding on to this girl for long anyway with a lot of skeevy metaphors. I don't know, maybe things have changed, but I thought you actually got to keep the trophies if you want to run with that metaphor. So yeah, this song sucks. Next, number 91, There Was This Girl by Riley Greene. Shoot me and let's get into trouble, Green. I ain't never seen. So let's now move on to the country artist that I've never heard of. Apparently Riley Greene was a contestant on CMT's Redneck Island, and after some self-release projects touted for a little bit more of a neo-traditional sound, he signed to Big Machine, and it appears that a fair amount of that has gone out the window, as this sounds like a tune cribbing from what Dierks Bentley and Luke Bryan were making before the whole bro country wave in the early 2010s, with the chunky guitars and little coherent groove in the low end. Well, you know what I will say, it's markedly better than whatever Michael Ray shat out, even if I do find the production to be a little underweight as a whole and kind of underwhelming, which is what I would also say about his vocals. Now, if there's anything that I would give any credit here, it might come with some of the songwriting. Yeah, it's in a similar arc that goes from going wild to performing to getting married and then settling down, and there's a girl that fits in all three scenarios, but the framing of the hook is that there is a different girl in each scene dragging him along the way. It's got a certain kind of low-key charm to it. In other words, no, it wasn't worth pushing Casey Musgraves off the Hot 100, but this is at least passable. I'll take it. Number 87, Worth It by YK Osiris. You gotta be worth it. You don't gotta be perfect. Alright, switching from a country artist I've never heard of to a trap artist I've never heard of. And to my surprise, this is actually pretty good. Yeah, it's pretty disposable, sure. He's a new Def Jam signee who blew up off of Instagram videos, and you could tell they weren't giving him that much to work with, given the cheap, rattling trap beat sounds pretty rickety, and we're only getting a single verse. But YK Osiris has a bite and force of charisma to his delivery that I could definitely groove with, and his choice to tack on a guitar solo to flesh out the song is the sort of move I'm actually a little bit stunned more trap acts haven't tried. Hell, why isn't Post Malone done it? It'd just be so obvious coming from him. In a strange way, this guy kind of reminds me a little bit of Fetty Wap and having a solid melodic sensibility and keeping his hustle for this girl relatively clean in his content. Let's hope that his career actually holds up more than Fetty Wap's does, cause you know what? I'm kind of digging this. Check it out. Number 86, 365 by Zedd and Katy Perry. Honest question, who the hell is managing Katy Perry right now? I get that after the disaster that was the Witness era, she needed to think outside the box to find a new lane, but Zedd is the sort of producer who eats the voices of his singers alive, rarely flattering them in a way that Katy Perry needed in the best of times. And with this, okay, you know what? I want to give her a little bit of credit. The vocal melody she's working with is actually pretty decent, especially on the hook. And when we get to the spare keyboards leading into the very gentle bounce, it's not bad. Yeah, her voice is so obviously manipulated that it's tough to see much personality that she's bringing here, but I can kind of see the appeal. But how much is Zedd going to recycle that ticking clock sound effect, or really highlight how much of his production is pulling from a lot of his competition right now? In this case, I can't be the only one who thinks that Diplo or Skrillex could have made this very same production beat a lot more interesting probably 3 years ago, right? And as for the content, well, for this sort of music, it really feels thin, unsurprisingly. The sort of love song so infatuated with the concept of time that you would think there'd be some sort of punchline on how fleeting it all feels, and that just never happens. I don't know, from the looks of things, not even many Katy Perry fans were on board with this one. It's just kind of forgettable. But if we wanted to head into an area where the quality just evaporates, number 84, Eyes on You by Chase Rice.
If you're there, girl, I've got my eyes on you.
Okay, let me make this clear. I've known this was coming for some time now, ever since he rode the very bottom of the bro country wave to very minor success back in 2014, and I reviewed that album. I knew that Chase Rice would find whatever possible opportunity to make a comeback in the mainstream, and here we are. A single from his 2017 album that nobody cared about, that only got popular in country right now because he's got a snap beat and he's one of the few guys who can hop on the half-talk delivery before it was cool. But you know what, say what you will about Kane Brown, he at least has some better taste and production than this. What is that gummy synthetic touch around the post-chorus and the muddy melody? It just sounds kind of gross. Now, to give this song the slightest bit of credit, Chase Rice is not a terrible singer, and the content might seem innocent enough, until you realize that for as much as this guy is staring at the girl, he never actually engages with her, no matter where around the world they might be, which is just kind of goddamn creepy when you think about it. So again, just like with 5 years ago, I can tell the genuine article from a real wannabe, and this is exactly the latter. And it sucks. But speaking of awful production, number 80, Talk You Out of It by Florida Georgia Line.
I just wanna talk you out of it. Yeah.
I remember getting comments before I even reviewed Florida Georgia Line's last album that this is one of the worst songs on the project, and while I would argue there are a few that are absolutely worse than this is by no means good, mostly because it highlights the painful limitations of this duo and a complete misunderstanding of their strengths. And like with Chase Rice, a big part of the issue is the production. Yeah, I don't dislike the prominent pedal steel, I'm happy that's here, but what the hell is that fizzy filter dropped over the painfully synthetic percussion that's more prominent in the mix than any actual consistent melody? But a larger problem might be that Tyler Hubbard is trying to sell a slick R&B inflected tune with some very limp pickup lines, and this is a brand of game that he just doesn't have. It doesn't flatter his voice. And look, I've already torn this duo a new one around the whole can't say they ain't country question, but would it have killed you guys to, instead of referencing Luther Vandross, actually mention a country act in this lane? Just seems like the obvious move to make, that's all I'm saying. Because this is pretty bad even with that. Number 49, Red Room by Offset.
Riding through the city 30 mags. Niggas snitching, they the police with no badge. How I grew up, my mama with my dad. So when I blew up, I put her in the bag.
So look, I've got zero interest in reviewing a solo Offset album. More than ever, I'm convinced that Migos needs the whole crew to make decent music, and even then it's conditional on the production and how many bad lines there are per song. So with the expectation we're gonna see a bunch more Offset coming next week, what does this song do? Honestly, not a lot, mostly because it sounds like a Quavo song doing a Travis Scott impression. Seriously, I thought we all figured this out on Without Warning. Offset works best against aggressive and darker beats, not auto-tuned warbling like this, and it's not like the production adds much to this at all. Hell, on the first few bars of the opening verse, Offset sounds so sleepy he's actively slipping off the beat, and his inability to stay on topic consistently isn't exactly engrossing me here either. More egregiously, if you're gonna bitch at violent police injustice, first of all, maybe this shouldn't come from Migos, but also maybe it's not the best idea to frame your own violence and gunslinging so casually alongside your flexing bars. Maybe it just kinda undercuts your message there. But you know what, that's nitpicking. In truth, nobody cares about the content, and I can't see this doing all that well regardless, as just kind of dreary and lifeless, approaching potent ideas but not really executing on them. Whatever, let's move on. Number 27, Robbery by Juice WRLD.
Ain't nobody gets hurt. Now I'm running from your love. I'm not fast, so I'm making it worse.
So okay, let's provide some context to this. Apparently an old version of this song was leaked last year before Juice WRLD had even blown up, and now it's been repackaged as the lead-off single for his sophomore album. Probably not what I would do if I was a label executive, but I guess his handlers are assuming his fans are so clueless enough not to hear the original. But okay, fine. Is this at least tolerable as an older song? Well, I think some of that is entirely dependent on Juice WRLD's singing, which is about as bad as your below-average pop emo band from the mid-2000s. And man, I can't take this seriously at all. It sounds like he tried to make a Post Malone song and failed, especially when he goes into his upper register against those delicate pianos and this leaden trot beat. It's one of the most humiliating caterwauling I've heard in a long time on a trap song. Simple Plan would laugh at this. And then when you couple it with some of the most asinine writing from him in a long time, because she robbed him of his heart, you see, and his dad said never to let your woman know that you're secure, but now that she's left him behind, and now after all, he has to flex on a woman anytime that they're insecure. Honestly, I could make a whole essay out of the toxic masculinity in this song alone, but it being so hilariously atrocious and incompetent, it kind of makes my argument for me. So, you know what? Thank you, Juice WRLD. You've given us the bitch fest anthem of 2019 very early, and have thoroughly killed any desire I might have to hear your next album. Enjoy being a punchline, because if this doesn't smother your career and momentum in the crib, I don't know what will, because this is atrocious. And finally, number 5, Please Me by Cardi B and Bruno Mars.
You got what I want and what I need, baby.
Let me hear you say,
Please.
let me hear you say.
So I'll freely admit I had low expectations for this, most because it felt like a very rushed label move to push this song. Finesse was a huge pop crossover smash on a retro R&B groove, Bruno Mars looking to yank his trajectory more into the 90s, and seemingly everything Cardi B puts out makes bank regardless of quality, and thus we get Please Me. And let me stress, I like this more than Money, but not by much. The vocal production around Bruno Mars' voice sounds really thin and cheap, kind of alarming given that Bruno is credited as a co-producer, and you have the tinny klaxon running through the melody, doesn't really click off the trap skitter, and as much as I like the idea of the Jodeci sample, the groove is just nowhere near as good as the original. Yeah, Cardi B's got a couple good quotables opposite Bruno Mars, who is singing his ass off, but she's not a good singer, and I prefer she gets some more organic production that can flatter her more flamboyant style regardless. Now don't get me wrong, this will be a hit, it's got all the components for it, but it's also not really clicking for me. It's not bad by any means, but not good either. So yeah, pretty bad week. But there were a couple highlights. I mean, the best is going to Worth It by YK Osiris for a pretty solid surprise. And I'm sorry, I can't even give an honorable mention in good faith. There's just nothing good here. Whereas for the worst of the week, Robbery by Juice WRLD just steals it away for being the sort of song that left-wing Twitter and YouTube should flip into a meme ASAP. And the dishonorable mention is going to Eyes on You by Chase Rice. You know what, I'm sparing Florida Georgia Line here because at least with the pedal steel, they were trying a little bit harder than this. But next week, hey, I don't know, we got Lil Pump and Gunna and Offset, so stay tuned for that. Until then, I'm Mark, you're watching Billboard Breakdown on Spectrum Pulse, and I'll see you next time.